Imagine you're at the supermarket. Your cart is full of groceries, and you swipe your card. Declined. You swipe again. Declined. That was the reality for Dr. Magare Gikenyi when he discovered the county government of Nakuru had stopped his salary. No email, no phone call, just an empty bank account. The government's justification was straightforward. Dr. Gikenyi's 4-year study leave had expired. He hadn't requested an extension or reported back to his station. Under standard public service regulations, the employer applied the principle of no work, no pay. But an employment contract functions like a legal partnership. Even when a relationship breaks down, a partner cannot unilaterally change the locks on a shared house without a formal prior conversation. The employer may have been correct about the policy violation, but being right on the facts does not grant an employer permission to ignore the legal requirement for notification. The Supreme Court addressed this in the Gikenyi ruling, classifying a salary stoppage as a formal administrative action. This designation subjects payroll decisions to the same strict constitutional oversight as a dismissal or a suspension. This flowchart illustrates the employer's specific failure. They had the justification for the penalty, but the procedural pipeline was broken. They failed to issue a formal show cause letter or provide a hearing where the employee could explain the absence. These requirements are rooted in Article 47 of the Constitution, which guarantees the right to fair administrative action. This provision acts as an overarching shield, protecting the due process rights of every employee, even those in breach of their contracts. Because procedural fairness is a non-negotiable constitutional checkpoint, any unnotified salary stoppage effectively becomes an illegal act. The legal standard shifts even further when the issue isn't an employee who won't show up, but one who can't show up the same way. When operations manager Simon Gichuru returned to work after spinal surgery, he arrived on crutches. His employer immediately forced him onto sick leave, then suspended him. The company argued his physical impairment made it impossible for him to perform his duties. In court, the company insisted their actions were legally sound, framing the suspension as a standard management decision based purely on his inability to move unaided. Forcing an employee out because the workplace contains physical barriers they cannot cross qualifies as illegal constructive dismissal. The Supreme Court found that these actions constituted indirect discrimination. By demanding that Gichuru navigate the workplace exactly like his non-disabled peers, the company effectively punished him for a trait outside his control. The employer also failed to conduct a professional medical assessment. They relied on their own visual observations of his crutches rather than using clinical data to determine his actual remaining capabilities. This highlights the legal mandate of reasonable accommodation. Employers are required to modify the physical workspace or the nature of the duties to assist employees with disabilities, unless the company can prove it would cause undue hardship. Treating a disabled employee exactly the same as a non-disabled employee without removing environmental barriers violates the constitutional right to equal opportunity. These legal protections are backed by severe financial consequences for employers who prioritize administrative speed over constitutional rights. The Ken Freight case dismantled the myth that companies can settle unfair terminations by simply paying notice pay. Under Section 49, judges can award victims of unlawful dismissal up to 12 months' gross salary as compensation, calculated to reflect the gravity of the procedural breach. Every employee in Kenya holds an absolute right to receive a formal show cause letter before an employer takes any adverse action against their salary. Acquiring a disability triggers a legal duty for the employer to provide reasonable accommodation, ensuring the worker continues their role through modified environments or duties. These procedural requirements are not internal HR suggestions, they are mandatory constitutional rights. While an employer retains the authority to manage their workforce, the Kenyan legal system rigorously punishes any attempt to exercise that authority by ignoring the legal shields protecting the employee.